July 6th, 2023. Some people say, well, you put too much information in there and it's boring and I don't see why it's relevant. I went to the courthouse. I found out that the Gator Lodge was sold at sometime in 74. So that place is Bundy in Jacksonville prior to 74. It could have been as early as 68. But why Jacksonville? Now, the Gator Lodge or Gator Inn, owned by the King, Susan and Sam King, sold in 74, had two daughters, Lisa and Linda. Have not heard from them. The granddaughter gave a spontaneous statement that, oh, my mother met him when she was a little girl at Gator Lodge. My grandparents owned the Gator Inn. And I said, oh, wow. But there was a line, and I was actually buying Ann Rule's final edition, I think, so it was several years ago. Like I said, she looked kind of like Tina Fey with glasses. And she spontaneously said, my mom met him when she was a little girl at the Gator Inn. So little girl, she's born in 61, 68, late in the year would make her maybe 7, almost 8 years old. That's a little girl. But how could they remember it? But there may be written evidence. And maybe people don't respond because they don't want to get involved. So here's the thing. If you look at this video, I'm going to splice it to the other one. I'm standing there with a little red surfer shirt and a straw fedora because we went to Daytona. My father would take 2 weeks a year. I went down to Kathleen's with that diary. My mom would have never looked at that diary. It was kind of a throwaway gift. It was something she probably thought when I was in 6th and 7th grade that if I wrote more and journalized something she wanted to do, she picked it up at Grant's or Woolworth's. I had a shelf that had knickknacks, a ceramic kitten, golden books, comic books, teen magazines with David Cassidy and Davy Jones and Steve McQueen. I think they were called Tween or something. But my mom wasn't going to look in that book because it was more or less a throwaway gift. It was like a consolation prize gift, and I didn't write in it very much. So if she was looking at it at 66 and 67, by 68, she was probably done with the stupid little chintz. It was a chintzy thing. I wrote about the adventure because it was so stunning to me, so exceptional, so odd, And I went down to Kathleen's to show her what had happened to me and Debbie, and that's when Debbie said, no, we'll get in big trouble. You've got to rip it out. Your mom will read your diary. She'll find out we hitchhiked and he displayed a gun. She wasn't protecting us. She was protecting him. He had their phone number and he made a decision. He probably fed a line to her that I was trying to scare your friend to keep her from ever hitchhiking again. The reason the little red surfer shirt is very important is because, one, I never hung around Miss Sex and Miss Hoag's home when she was going to be an entertainer at one of the nightclubs, the heart of Jacksonville, the Mayport Naval Station, wherever she was going. You don't want to be around when she was dolling herself up. It wasn't a playtime. She was bipolar and manic depression. She had dark eyelashes. It was just scary, really. There was no point in being there with your little Barbie dolls and tic-tac-toe and checkers or whatever we did. So I wasn't there. So I wouldn't have been there after 5. So if he came by, I wouldn't have seen the red Volkswagen again. If she said, in her mind, people were man crazy or boy crazy, and she might have thought this guy was too good a catch, and he could have sold them a line. He could have said, I was just trying to scare your friend or something, a weird way to scare people with pointing a revolver at the ceiling. Theodore Bundy. And I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, this happened. You don't forget it. I remember it. I don't know what he was doing here June 5th, 67, but I'll never forget it. So, and it seemed like everybody's protecting them. It's weird. So Dale Carson Jr., Debbie would throw stuff out every now and then. It's like, oh, Dale Carson's staying with his girlfriend, Kathy, and he didn't go to our school. This was maybe a year or two later, 14, 15. I said, what? The only reason I knew of the Carsons, there was a sign at the Intercoastal Waterway, and Dale Carson Sr., the sheriff, had a sign, who I worked for a short time, but it said, speed kills. Well, that had a double entendre for us children, because back in the 60s, speed was a drug that you took, an amphetamine. So Yeah, speed kills. Yeah, it could kill, or driving fast could kill. So I said, "How do you know Dale Carson? He didn't go to our high school. How do you know him?" And she says, "Oh, the maid told us he was." I said, "How do you know the maid?" The mother, Doris Carson, was an OBGYN. If you look at Duval County, say there's 15 high schools in 1967, 68. How many unwed women were there in Duval County? Unwed girls that got pregnant from, problems, so got pregnant too soon. So the sister, who was pregnant around 68, must have gone to Doris Carson. Now, I don't know if the older sister last name is Hogue. I don't know that. But she may have been born out of wedlock because she was a bit older than Vicki and Debbie. And the mother was born around 1928, and she was born at 45. That's 17 years old. That's not marriage time, but it was after World War II. She may have lied about her age, and she did have sort of an open face, so she might have been Mr. Hogue's daughter. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I was around Debbie 10 years. I never said, well, is your daughter a half, I never thought it. She did have darker hair. She's pregnant. Debbie knows stuff about the Carsons, and the only way that she could know about the Carsons is through her sister, who had become pregnant out of wedlock. Another time we went to the roller derm, and she wanted to go across the street to the bowling alley. And I'm thinking, why do we get? And there was a whole set of events where a girl hit her head on the sidewalk, and a guy had an open case of beer. And I'm thinking, why don't we just stay at the roller derm? And why did we go to the roller derm when we're already 15 or 16? But I went, but I didn't see who she was meeting. And then another time we went to Riviera Apartment, and a guy who I'd say looked kind of like Michael Nesmith of the Monkees, kind of in my mind, with tan bell bottoms and maybe a turtleneck. I don't know, white turtleneck. He wouldn't let us get a glass of water out of the refrigerator. I started worrying about my bike downstairs, and he had a bicycle wheel hooked to the rafters with kitchen utensils. And she was bringing him like a Dear John letter, some kind of legal. It was typewritten. I mean, it was typewriter paper. If that was him, I don't know. It didn't look like the guy in the car. The guy in the car looked QT. He looked suave, is what they would say back then. Even though he was just wearing shirts and didn't have a shirt on, he had moles around his neck, sharp haircut, and then there was a bad body odor in there. And he tapped the steering wheel a couple times. And I said, "You ought to meet Vicki and Jeannie. They're so pretty, and they're already out on their own. Debbie's father's an admiral." I said, "What's your name?" He said, Theodore. And I said, "Theodore?" I said, "Well, what's your last name?" And he said, "Bundy." I said, "Your name is Bundy like my clarinet, and your gun is silver like Debbie's flute. You ought to meet Debbie's sisters, or if you're looking for girls, you ought to go up to high school." But anyway, okay. If I went to Kathleen's a few days later, Thursday or Friday, and we're getting ready to go to Daytona, we would go for a week. So my dad usually had 2 weeks a year. I can see my grandmom and my aunt came, and we went, my Aunt Ope and my grandmother, and we went to Mayport Naval Station sometime in August, because I'm standing there with that shirt and that fedora. I didn't have that before. That meant I was leaving the neighborhood for a good 7 to 9 days. And Bundy himself needed to be back on the West Coast. So it's the 10th, and I mean, the 19th, and he's got to be over there in the West Coast by the 24th. So he had to have 3 to 5 days, and he needed money. So why didn't he sell the handgun? I wondered about that too. But when Bundy headed down from Seattle, there's a girl in Rob Dellenberg's book. Her name was, I think it was Susan Caldwell, and she was shot 14 times, and I don't know what the forensics were like back then. I think a revolver may hold 7 rounds, I don't know. And she was also bashed on her head and left off I-5. Then you come down, there's a girl that I found that had just recently been married. She was real pretty, and it bothers me. I think her name was something like Bobette or something. And she was painting the picket fence, because she and her husband they had trailer sales and trailer rentals. And she goes in Hesperia, California, gone. Her little dog's running around. She's gone, never was seen again, which is south of Palo Alto. And then Ken Maines, Unsolved No More, just went over a girl named Nikki Bennett, who went from Poway, California, right in that May. So May Caldwell, May woman Hesperia, California, and May the Nikki Bennett, and then over to the East Coast where he runs out of money somewhere, and he had a golf shirt, and I think he took a spring break. There was something wrong with him. Now he says later, the end of that summer was like a nightmare. So I'm thinking of pregnant. I've never been pregnant. Matter of fact, I had endometrial cancer and had a radical hysterectomy and the whole 9 yards. So, but it does say that some women spot that very first month. So if it's a young girl, 19, 18, 19, never was pregnant before. Now she's had an affair. She's knew this guy about 2 weeks, and it gets hot and heavy, and she becomes pregnant. She doesn't know the first right off. So she may not know June, July, but by August she knows. But she may not know that first July because she's thinking, oh, I'm spotting. It's okay. I don't know. And then later on, I asked about the baby, or Miss Sexton was there, and she was crazy. Let's face it. She said the baby was stillborn, and it was a male baby. It was stillborn. I learned the word stillborn and false pregnancy and yada yada. And then Bundy talks about, and I had to go through a series of foster homes, and there's just things that bug me that maybe during the period from June of 67 through the fall of 69, was he running around like a chicken with his head cut off? Because he had the resentment that he was illegitimate, right? That was his main thing. I'm illegitimate. I'm holding it inside. I resent it for my whole life. Now, all of a sudden, maybe he produced a child out of wedlock, and he flies back to Diane. He rides back there. He didn't think that's going to work. It's not working with Jeannie because she's a liberal and wants to burn her bra and be a liberated woman. It's not working with Diane because she finds him weird. So both harbors in a storm. And Bundy always had a backdoor person. Anyway, I've attached the other one to this so you can, see it. The little shirt that I have. I didn't have that in June because the vacation had to have been shortly after I talked to Kathleen and Debbie, and I was out of town. So if any assignations occurred with this Bundy guy and them, it would have been after I was out of town. And then by the time I got back, he probably had to go on. And it just seems to me in my mind that there was a Volkswagen parked at Stanley and Greg's Parker's home at some point. And I think somebody said, well, that's Stanley's car. He's back, All right. That's all I can say. I didn't hear from Lisa. I did write the columnist Mark Woods, but it's already been said. The statement is, oh, my mom met him when she was a little girl at Gator Lodge. That there had to be written records because if you stay at a motel, there's a written record. All right, thank you.